Last time I looked at a bunch of upcoming card games for the first time, but I wasn't satisfied at just leaving them at first impressions. I need to dig deeper, and the first game on my list was Polywog, and what I discovered will shock you. I think I broke it. But before I get to that, let's do a quick refresher overview of the game. Polywog is a game where you have to deck out your opponent to win. You play Polywog cards onto Battle Pad cards, which you can have up to 4 of on the board. These Polywogs all have stages where they can evolve into more powerful cards, kind of like Pokemon evolution. You can play the stage 1s on the board, but the stage 2 and stage 3 cards have to be played on top of their previous forms. However, unlike Pokemon, you still have to pay the cost of the next evolution when you play it, and you pay for that cost with Polyrads. Normally you're set to 2 Polyrads at the beginning of your turn, but you can play Polyrad cards like this one to get more Polyrads. You can also spend a Polyrad at any point to draw a card. There's also spell type cards called Keepers where you play them, they do their thing, and then they go to the discard pile. After you're done playing cards, you go to battle where your Polywogs can attack your opponent's Polywogs, dealing their attack damage to the opposing Polywog's health. The damage persists through turns unless you heal it with a card effect. If your opponent has no Polywogs, you can attack their deck, which sends cards to the Forgotten Zone depending on how strong the Polywog is. After you're done attacking, the turn passes to your opponent where they can do all of the things that I've just said. And that's the super condensed and simplified rules, so you can hopefully follow along with the rest of this video on why I think this game is going to have a rough time. Starting with, this is an elemental Polywog. It's like a super powered element swapped version of a Polywog's final form. Seacroak is normally a stage 3 grass type Polywog, but he also has an elemental version where he's a stage 1 crystal type? That's kind of weird, but maybe he's just a stage 1 to show that you can play him on the board and you don't need to evolve him. It's not like there's any cards that can just play stage 1s. Uh-oh. This is Frognado, a 2-cost keeper that plays a battle pad and 2 stage 1 Polywogs from your deck. Well, this Seacroak says he's stage 1, so I could just play 2 of them. Yeah, turn 1 play, baby. Okay, so this is a gimmicky combo thing, right? You need to actually draw a Frognado to do this, and you can only play 4 copies of it. Oh yeah, that's true. But then there's this. This keeper lets you get 3 keepers from your deck, and it also costs 2, so you can grab another strategic keeper and then whatever else you need. I really wish it stopped there, but there's actually a lot more you can do with this elementals or stage 1 ruling. There's this card called Hoppy Niffy from the Easter side set. It's another very expensive stage 1. When you play it, you can fill your arena with as many battle pads as you can and then play stage 1 Polywogs from your deck to those pads. So now you can use Frognado to play Hoppy Niffy, who will then play 2 more battle pads and then 2 elementals on those pads. You know what? You don't even actually need Frognado because there's also this card, Festive Polypod, where you can pay 1 Polyrad to play a stage 1 Hoppy Polywog to the board. And guess what Hoppy Niffy is? If you start the game with a Battle Pad and Festive Polypod, you can pay 1 Polyrad to play the 6-cost Hoppy Niffy for free from your deck. Then, Hoppy Niffy finds 2 more Battle Pads and 2 more Elementals that cost from 4 to 6 each from your deck and plays all of them. That means you've turned 1 Polyrad into 14 to 18 Polyrads. That's some serious Polystonks. Stonkywogs? I keep talking about battle pads, but I always show the same one. What gives? Well, battle pads have effects, and this one lets you dodge any one attack of your choosing during your opponent's turn. Compared to the other battle pads that do things like heal 20 HP or give plus 10 damage and do 10 damage back to the attacker, dodging an enemy attack entirely seems like it's on a whole other level. So attacking hardly works because you need at least 2 strong attacks to get any damage through. How do you deal with these monstrosities? Your greatest removal card that you should probably always play the maximum number of copies of. Pad return sends a battle pad from the board back to your hand, and if a Polywog is on the board without a battle pad, it falls in the pond and drowns. So that makes this essentially a 2 Polyrad, send any Polywog on the board to the discard pile. There's a couple Polywog that can survive without being on a pad, and there's one card that allows things to stay on the board without a pad, but that's what Geyser is for. Geyser just sends a Polywog to the Forgotten Zone and then it sends itself to the Forgotten Zone. There's also a few weird cards that you're only allowed to run 1 of. Battle Ready says as soon as you draw this, you can play any Polywog, Battle Pad, and Mutation from your deck to the board.
Yeah, that seems fine.
The next one, Untapped Potential, lets you put 2 cards from your Forgotten Zone back to the top of your deck so you can reuse things like Geyser and Battle Ready, because it also sends itself to the Forgotten Zone after it gets used. The last one isn't on the TTS mod, I've been showing these often, but oops, sends your opponent's entire hand to the Forgotten Zone. Just bye-bye, no more cards. With that, let's build the ultimate Polywog deck. First, we add a bunch of elementals and Hoppy Niffy. It doesn't really matter how much these cards cost because we'll almost always be playing them for free off of something like Frognado, which we'll definitely include 4 of. We'll also throw in the 3 festive Polypods so that we can play Hoppy Niffy to an empty battle pad for 1 Polyrad. And to make sure we have Frognado or festive Polypod, we'll put 4 copies of Strategic Keeper in there so we can always have the spells we want when we want them. As for battle pads, we're only running Shadow Pad because all the other ones are stinky. I'm also throwing in 1 Pad Market Keeper that can add 1 pad to hand and 1 to field. Probably don't need this, but you know, why not? To make our shadow pads even more el stupido, we're gonna run some colorful camouflage, which is a mutation, which is just like an equip thing you can put on a Polywog that says the attached Polywog can only be attacked once per turn, which we will dodge with Shadow Pad, making our Polywogs basically immune to any combat damage. If we go against an evolution-based deck, we're probably already winning, but in the mirror match, we're gonna need to max out our copies of Pad Return and Geyser so we can remove any elementals that show up. Then we're gonna run as many small meteorite and meteor showers as we can to pump up them Polyrads for when our elementals get bounced back to our hand or if we just happen to draw them. We're also running Glowing Skin, which is a mutation that lets us get 2 Polyrads on every turn after the turn you attach it, as long as the Polywog gets attached to stays alive. Most Polyrad increase cards give the increase to both players, but this one only gives it to you, so yeah, it's pretty good. Let's throw in regular Niffy as well. This card lets us play 2 Polywog on the same battle pad as long as Niffy remains on the field. This might make us more susceptible to Pad Return or Forgotten Pad, which straight up nukes pads, so we'll throw in 2 copies of Drought as well, an arena card that works like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Field spell. It lets Polywogs exist on the board without a battle pad. If we take any early game damage in the rare case that we cannot pop off quickly, we're adding Gold Coin, which can grab any card from the Forgotten Zone or discard pile and put it back in your hand. This card is really funny with the big one-of bombs, Battle Ready, and Untapped Potential that I mentioned earlier. When either of these cards are drawn, they're immediately played and sent to the Forgotten Zone. If these cards ever end up in your hand, they send themselves to the bottom of your deck, which you can then play a card that searches for something, you shuffle your deck after the search, and then hopefully draw the one-of and use its effect again. I would also definitely run Oops if I had it. For the last few cards, I'm adding a bit of a loop to the deck that probably isn't necessary in the slightest. We have Tiny Hands, which discards your hand down to 3 cards, which sounds awful until you see Rewind, which shuffles your discard pile back into your deck. You can easily get 20 cards back in your deck by the time you play this, and that's 20 more life points your opponent's going to have to get through. I feel like every competitive deck in this game would just be some version of this. Evolving is too slow and it needs too many pieces and resources for it to work, and there's too many removal cards that could just easily get rid of it. Just spam out all the biggest booties in the game on turn 1 or 2. You have a 60 card deck and the maximum damage per attack is 3. So if you don't open any of your combo cards, you're not going to immediately die to aggro. Speaking of opening, I actually forgot the last card of the deck. The rules say you need to start with a stage 1 Polywog that costs 2 or less, and we definitely don't have that right now. However, if you don't have one, you shuffle your deck and draw again? So I have 12 cards in my hand now? I'm pretty sure it's supposed to say that you put your hand back on the deck and then shuffle it, but it doesn't, and that's kind of funny. Also, the line below it says you place a Polywog face down. So by these rules, I need a stage 1 that costs 2 or less in my hand to keep my hand, but then I can play a Polywog. I'm pretty sure that's not intended though, but I thought it was pretty good at illustrating that this game wasn't thought through very thoroughly. Anyways, there is no downside to doing this mulligan multiple times, so we're going to put 1 copy of Shamrock Froggo, which is a 2-cost stage 1 Polywog that can't be damaged by any attack that does 20, 40, 60, or 80 damage. Perfect. He can sit around until we get our board of massive dinguses out. And that's the unbeatable Polywog deck. There's probably some other cards you could consider or swap, but I think the core pieces are pretty sound. And by that I mean they kind of just bypass the way I believe the game was intended to be played, and it's just kind of broken. I would also like to take this time to point out some cards that just made me go, what? Like this guy, Werewog. He's a stage 3 whose attack does no damage unless the opposing Polywog has a mutation, to which he removes the mutation and deals everything but 10 of that Polywog's health. The mutations, for the most part, aren't that great, and this is a stage 3 that you'd have to put at least 2 other cards and 6 Polyrads worth of resources into. The payoff just doesn't seem worth the effort. Another one is Lucky Draw. When you play it, you reveal one random card from your deck, and you either have to play it or send it to the discard pile. What? Do I need to pay for it? It says any Polywog can be placed on an empty battle pad or evolve on an existing Polywog. Why would I evolve it when I could just play it for free? I don't know how this card is supposed to work. Then there's Lucky Pad, which lets you do this every turn. Maybe I was wrong about Shadow Pad being the only good pad card. How about this one, Umbroxotl? He can't be attacked until he attacks an opponent. So does that mean if I just don't attack, he's just an immovable object that has to be removed with a keeper like pad return? Brutal. Finally, the Polyrad cards increasing both players' Polyrads is kind of weird. The basic one is fine, you play it for free, and you get an extra Polyrad, which does immediately give you the 1. But the next one, Meteor Shower, costs 2 and gives you 3. So you net an extra 1 on this turn, but then your opponent gets the full 3 and they didn't pay for squat. After digging deeper into this game, I'm honestly pretty disappointed. It seems like this game was not tested very well. Cards are just all over the place in power level, and there's a few very obviously broken mechanics. I'm not making this series to tell people how they should make their game, but a good chunk of this would be so easily fixed if elementals were just their own type instead of just being stage 1 cards. And if there was a downside to mulliganing so you can't do it infinite times.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I didn't find a basic Polywog. Oh no, I didn't find a basic Polywog. Oh no, I didn't find a basic Polywog that cost 2 or less.
But tonk, I think I've dug about as deep as I can go right now on Polywog. Did you like this examination, or would you prefer more general overviews of games like I did in my previous video, 7 games in 7 days? Let me know in them comments, and then the liking and the subscribing and all the things that every YouTuber tells you to do. I am the card game Crypt Master, 2 lanes, and I am out.